I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics, messianicapologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider, your theology and news roundup for December the 18th, 2025. Today, we are going to discuss English versions of the Apocrypha. We are presently in the middle of the Festival of Dedication, Hanukkah. A huge part of Hanukkah is reading the account of the Maccabean revolt or Maccabean crisis from the 2nd century BCE. Those of us in biblical studies tend to take this period of history for granted because, let's face it, we've got Bibles, study Bibles, one-volume commentary sets, which have the Books of Maccabees and people who have commented on the Books of Maccabees. And we recognize it as valuable history, philosophy for understanding the 1st century period and the expanse of the good news into the Mediterranean basin. But a lot of people in the Messianic community, a lot of people out there in the world of ideas, they encounter something. I've heard about this Maccabean crisis. I've heard about it, but they don't quite know what to do. And while every Messianic congregation and synagogue is different, perhaps this past Shabbat or this upcoming Shabbat, you're going to hear some teachings about the Maccabean crisis. And that starts with having a Bible which includes the books of the Apocrypha in it for you to be able to read, access, and reflect upon. Now, the books of the Apocrypha, also known as the Deuterocanon, they are considered canonical in Roman Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy. The Anglican Church would broadly consider them to be Deuterocanon, and Protestants tend to treat them as valuable history, philosophy, commentary, similar to the way Judaism approaches it. So it's in that tier of Second Temple Jewish literature, and indeed, very important for understanding background of statements made in the New Testament, background of some of the events which preceded the arrival of Yeshua and the apostles. So if you'll turn with me to the Messianic Apologetics website, messianicapologetics.net, click on the FAQs tab, and this is a list of the FAQs we've released from 2000 all the way to 2018, so going back all the way to the old TNN Online or Theology News Network website. These are in alphabetical order. Because we're dealing with the Apocrypha, we don't have to go that far. So Apocrypha versions of, excuse me, simply click there and a PDF file will open up. All right, so we'll just go through this very, very quickly, and then I've got some props here I will show you. I know that the Apocrypha is not considered canonical scripture by Jews or Protestants, and mainly because it's part of the Greek Septuagint translation. But I am interested in finding a suitable modern English translation to use for reference. Which one or ones can you recommend? And indeed, there are some major English Bible translations on the market which include the books of the Apocrypha. There are 5 main versions of the Apocrypha included with some major Bible versions. There might be more today, so this is a little dated, which our ministry widely employs in our research. These include the following in order of their publication, along with a brief description of the Bible they are included with. The same order happens to be the order in which we generally use them for study. Okay. So I believe I originally wrote this back in 2006. But yeah, generally speaking, this is still pretty accurate. Okay, number 1, the Revised Standard Version, the RSV, which was released in 1952. This is considered today to be a centrist liberal Bible version, even though around 85 to 95% of it is widely reproduced in the more conservative New American Standard. Its Apocrypha translation is somewhat literal and true to the Septuagint Greek text behind it. It represents an ecumenical Protestant perspective with some Anglican and Catholic influences. Number 2, the New English Bible, 1970. This was the first modern Bible translation produced for Christians in the United Kingdom and represents an ecumenical perspective, including the Church of England, British Protestant denominations, and British Catholicism. Its Apocrypha translation represents a more dynamic equivalency translation than the RSV Apocrypha. Overall, the translation is left of center. Number 3, the New Revised Standard Version from 1989. This is the revised edition of the RSV, which primarily updated the RSV to include new scholarship unavailable when the RSV was produced. The NRSV represents a liberal ecumenical perspective and employs a concept known as inclusive language, whereby terms relating to man or mankind are replaced with the more neutral human or humanity. The Revised English Bible from 1989. This is the revised edition of the New English Bible, produced primarily for Christians in the UK. It employs inclusive language and represents a liberal ecumenical perspective. And then finally, number 5, the New Jerusalem Bible from 2000. This is a Catholic Bible translation, which is Catholic conservative in its approach, but employs dynamic equivalence. Its apocryphal books are not organized between the Old and New Testaments, but instead are sorted in within the Old Testament books. Okay, and there are a few honorable mentions. They include the New English translation of the Septuagint. That includes the apocryphal books. There's also the Lexham English Septuagint. That includes the apocryphal books. And they may have a more literal or a more faithful, let's say, rendering of the apocryphal books than even the 1952 Revised Standard Version. And there are, of course, other specialty editions of the Apocrypha available. But that'll give you a really good, if you just want to be able to show up to your Messianic congregation. Some quotations are being made from 1st and 2nd Maccabees. That'll give you a good idea about where to find a modern English version to take with you to your Shabbat service. Or if you are at home, you're having some kind of a Hanukkah study, Hanukkah reflection time, those versions would obviously be helpful. Now, I've got 3 study Bibles here. I've referred to these in the past, but I'm going to just show them to you anyway. This is the venerable New Oxford Annotated Bible with the Apocrypha, Revised Standard Version. So you see it here. This is the main, if you had to pick one version which has the Apocrypha in it, this is what I would choose. Just because it's a little older. It is liberal. It is definitely left of center, especially when you look at some of the introductions and annotations for the early Tanakh or Old Testament books, but it's a good mainstay to have. Now, my favorite of all of my left of center study Bibles, I've had this for over 20 years now, since my seminary days, is the New Interpreter's Study Bible. This is the New Revised Standard Version with the Apocrypha. So this is not as critical as some of the other tools out there. It is critical, no doubt about it. It's not a conservative study Bible, but it's not as liberal as some of the others you may encounter. And I do think that the New Interpreter's Study Bible is better than some of the editions out there of the New Oxford Annotated Bible, which would use the New Revised Standard. I believe that's now out in the 5th edition. I've got the 4th edition. Okay, and here, this is just for honorable mention too, the Oxford Study Bible. This is the Revised English Bible with the Apocrypha. So this is something I've had for since 2006 or so. Don't really use it that often, but those are some additions of the Holy Scriptures with the Apocrypha in them. And the apocryphal books are not incorporated into the Old Testament as they might be in some Catholic editions of the Bible. So you've got the Old Testament, then the Apocrypha, then the New Testament. And the Apocrypha has a place in our theology as Second Temple Jewish literature, history, philosophy, commentary. The period of the 2nd century BCE Maccabean crisis is very important for us, not only understanding, first of all, Jewish resistance to assimilation, the rededication of the temple, understanding, of course, that without the activity of the Maccabees, the Jewish people would probably have disappeared into Hellenism. There would have been no Jewish people for the Messiah to have been born into, which of course raises huge questions about the faithfulness of God, the promises of God. All right, so I just got a notification that we have lost sound. Well, we should be receiving sound. All right, so all right, we're just going to have to continue then, or we're going to have to start over. Okay, so we have a technical issue we're trying to resolve right now. Let me see if... Okay, so let's try this on X. All right, I'm sorry about that. Got a report that it wasn't working on YouTube, but it is working on X. So these things happen. All right, so the thing about the Maccabean crisis, very important for understanding that without the rededication of the temple by the Maccabees, there would be no, of course, okay, there would have been no Jewish people in order for Yeshua to have been born into. That, of course, raises questions about the faithfulness of God to his promises to the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Likewise, Yeshua of Nazareth needed to see, there needed to be an operating temple in Jerusalem for him to be dedicated in, and for him to perform various rituals, and for him to use as a teaching venue for various aspects of his ministry. And along with that, there are, of course, significant things as they concern Jewish continuity, assimilation, and as Prime Minister Netanyahu observed to Ambassador Huckabee, without the Maccabean revolt, without the preservation of the Jewish people, ultimately, would there even be a United States? But along with that, as a consequence of the 2nd century BCE Maccabean crisis, there was also a huge amount of xenophobia exhibited toward Greeks and Romans in later decades, and certainly with the expanse of the good news into the Mediterranean basin. There was a lot of resistance by various Messianic Jewish believers regarding their integration into the faith community. Could they just enter into the faith community because of the faith they had placed in the one God of Israel and the Messiah he had sent? Or in order to prove their true loyalty to the people of God, did they have to be circumcised as proselytes and be reckoned as ethnic Jews. And of course, the apostles ruled very clearly that they did not have to be reckoned as ethnic Jews in order to be integrated into the people of God. They were integrated into God's own by a matter of the faith they expressed in him, as it always had been from the time of Abraham. All right, so I do apologize about the whole sound issue. Not sure what happened. Maybe it's time to upgrade some of our equipment. We do have special year-end offering available for the end of the year, and I certainly hope and pray that you will consider giving us a special offering. So if necessary, in the first few weeks of calendar year 2026, we might need to get some upgraded equipment. We can do so.
It's back.
Okay. The sound is back on YouTube. All right. These things do happen from time to time, and I'm thankful that it happens on an episode where we don't have a huge, long, strung out teaching. All right. So that finishes up our theology roundup for today. Let's now move on to the news roundup. And we do the news roundup after the theology roundup because the news roundup changes from day to day. Number one, we need to be praying for peace, Israel, Gaza, the Middle East. Number two, be praying for peace, Russia, Ukraine. And number three, be praying for reason and sanity to prevail here on the American home front. All the news stories I'm about to go through, these will be archived for you to look at later today when this episode is posted to MessianicApologetics.net. All right, here we go. This is kind of a informative story. This is from Bruce Mejia. We've referenced him before. He proudly supports replacement theology. He believes God is finished with the ethnic descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He says here, pastors should remove all Israeli flags from their churches. And of course, why does he believe that? And of course, he also references Stephen Anderson, who is, we'll just say that he's a piece of work. But he believes that the Star of David is a demonic pagan symbol. That is something which has widely been debunked. It's just a geometric form, no different than a circle or a square or a rectangle or a five-pointed star or even human writing, whether that alphabet is Hebrew, Greek, Latin, Cyrillic, Chinese, Japanese, Arabic even. It's just a geometric symbol, and it's something which you can go to Israel and you can see it decorate various ancient synagogues in from the biblical period. But Bruce Mejia, no friend of the Messianic movement. We have referenced him before, especially when he has gone after our friend, Hello, Mrs. Rachel. He's gone after other people, and he's somebody who influences a lot. But the fact that he associates with open anti-Semites like Stephen Anderson, who then gets involved with, people on the alt-right, what have you, does not escape our notice. But yeah, that's a road sign indicating that Christian support for Israel probably peaked in the mid-2010s. That's also when the Messianic movement, Messianic Judaism, probably peaked in terms of people being interested and it having the widest amount of impact. Everything is now on a managed decline. But we're getting closer to the Lord's return, so we should be encouraged by that. All right, our next story, and this is from Open Source Intel Defender yesterday, 2:04 p.m. Some of you all have seen this. You can look at the pictures in greater detail later. The White House has installed descriptive plaques under the gold frame portraits of every president featured on the Presidential Walk of Fame just outside the Oval Office, with every plaque, of course, in some way having to mention President Trump. Okay, so previously, and I understand putting some kind of a picture of each president who has served somewhere on the White House grounds. Many of you all are familiar also with all the different portraits which go up the staircase at 10 Downing Street in London, all the British prime ministers, and how then when a new prime minister comes in, they alter it, adding a different portrait. So that doesn't surprise me at all. Of course, a lot of people have responded differently to how for the previous president, Joe Biden, there was a picture of an auto pen. Now, President Trump has added these plaques underneath each president. And according to this, at least, although I've only looked at the plaques for the past several presidents, so Biden, Obama, George Bush Sr., Bill Clinton, Trump is referred to in some way or another. How good is that? How bad is that? You have to make that decision for yourself. But we definitely know that this second Trump term has altered the dynamics in Washington. It's altered the dynamics at the White House. And at the very least, we can say that President Trump wants to get his perspective out there to people, right? And even if you don't like President Trump, you have to recognize that is what he's doing. All right, so here's a story from End Time Headlines yesterday. Interstellar object makes closest approach to Earth this Friday. So this is tomorrow, the same day of the Epstein files deadline. Okay, this is their perspective. Is it just a coincidence that interstellar object 3I Atlas makes its closest approach to Earth this Friday, which happens to be the same day of the Epstein files deadline? We'll wait and see what happens tomorrow. All right, from open source intel, and this is something which many of you all have heard by now. This is where I got my information. Dan Bongino, I will be leaving my position with the FBI in January. I want to thank President Trump, Attorney General Bondi, and Director Patel for the opportunity to serve with purpose. Most importantly, I want to thank you, my fellow Americans, for the privilege to serve you. We know that Dan Bongino has had some frustrations with the Department of Justice with where he was stationed. And we also know that it's been very hard on him personally to serve in that position, being away from his wife and family and that sort of thing. And is a better place for Bongino to serve his country back on the air with a radio program. Hey, it's between him and his family and his colleagues at the FBI, the DOJ. But we do wish him the best. And we know that should he return to the public sphere broadcasting, we're likely to hear a number of stories about what some of his experiences were. All right, our next story. This is from Open Source Intel. Israel, Greece, and Cyprus are examining the creation of a joint rapid response force in the Eastern Mediterranean, Ynet reported, citing Greece's Ta Nea. The proposal envisions a brigade-sized force of about 2,500 troops with land, air, and naval components, including fighter jets, warships, and submarines deployed across bases in the three countries and nearby Greek islands. The force would be aimed at deterring Turkey, giving Israel greater strategic depth and protecting regional energy infrastructure. Okay, so a lot of people have observed that Turkey is a possible problem. It wants to expand and influence in the region. Some have even drawn the conclusion that it wants to see the Ottoman Empire revived, as it were. How accurate or inaccurate is that? I don't know, but Greece, Cyprus, and even Israel haven't always had the best of relations with Turkey. So let's just see how this possibly develops. Okay, we only have 6 more stories to go through. Excuse me. From Visegrad 24, and there is a clip, 59 seconds with this. Maduro calls on Colombia and the Colombian military to intervene. He says it's time for a unified state and a greater Colombia, which existed 1819 to 1831. Maduro argues it's the only way to defend the two states against foreign attacks. Okay, so we know there's been building U.S. presence in the South Caribbean, huge naval task force. There's a lot of pressure on Maduro to leave Venezuela. So here he's calling on Venezuela and Colombia to merge into a Grand Colombia, Greater Colombia. We'll see. Because he knows that if he goes down, Colombia might very well be the next country that the Trump administration sets its eyes on. If indeed this really is about going after narco terrorism. But this does affect us here in the Western Hemisphere. And of course, as believers, our first and foremost responsibility is to pray for all of the believers, huge numbers of evangelicals for certain, in countries like Venezuela, Colombia, etc. Okay, here's a post from Newsmax. This came across my feed on Instagram yesterday. Rob Schmidt, the threat of Islamic extremist attacks now has governments jumping into performative politics and boneheaded moves rather than trying to protect their people. And apparently, the New Year's festivities in the city of Paris have been called off. That was what really caught my eye with this clip. Obviously, things can change, but what does that indicate, if at all true, about changing dynamics, certainly in Western Europe? We definitely know we all have to be careful about where we go, our surroundings, etc. All right, like many of you last night, I definitely watched President Trump's speech to the country. Here is one of the first responses from Open Source Intel, and there's a clip here. I recommend you watch the speech in its entirety. It's around 20 minutes or so, not too difficult to listen to. For the last 4 years, the United States was ruled by politicians who fought only for the insiders, illegal aliens, career criminals, corporate lobbyists, prisoners, terrorists, and above all, foreign nations, which took advantage of us at levels never seen before. But now you have a president who fights for the law-abiding, hardworking people of our country, the ones who make this nation run. Now, one of the things, of course, which I was listening for, which I did not hear in the president's speech last night, was what about the situation in Venezuela? I didn't hear anything about that. He did mention that he had stopped 8 wars and that he had stopped the Iranian nuclear program. Also, there was no reference to the Russia-Ukraine situation. But the president did say that because of America's 250th anniversary coming up, that our servicemen and women would be getting a bonus of $1,776, which I obviously do support because they put their lives on the line for us and to defend our freedom, and they deserve the bonus. All right, so here's a response, and I have to, for disclosure's sake, I still have not gotten my copy of Charlie Kirk's Stop in the Name of God book. But here, Forward magazine, Jewish Resources responding to it. In making a Christian case for Shabbat, Charlie Kirk stripped off its Judaism. Stop in the Name of God, the conservative influencer's final book, doesn't want to seem too Jewish. So you all can look through this if you've already read Charlie Kirk's book. There are going to be a lot of different responses to this. According to this, at least, he does make reference to some Jewish sources, Jewish figures like Joshua, excuse me, let me make sure I get his name right. Like Heschel, Abraham, Joshua Heschel, Jonathan Sachs, Viktor Frankl. Obviously, I have no clue what he says about that because I don't have his book. which is to be expected. That's hardly a surprise. But does Charlie Kirk approach the Sabbath more as a principle, which for him, he might have done it more on the seventh day of the week. For others, they might do it on the first day of the week, per Christian semi-Sabbatarianism. There's going to be a lot of different people who ask a lot of different questions because of Charlie Kirk's book. Okay, two more stories. Here we have from Visegrad 24, making note of NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. Putin has to know that after a peace deal, if he would try to attack Ukraine again, the reaction will be devastating. And this is exactly how we are designing these security guarantees. So, look, all we can do right now at this point is pray for hostilities to end and for some kind of an honorable peace, which is observed by both sides, to emerge. How difficult is that going to be? How impossible is it going to be? I know, like with a lot of people, I've become more negative toward it. Okay, and then finally, our last story. This is from Open Source Intel. U.S.-Russia relations are in a state of collapse, but Moscow hopes ties can begin to recover as progress is made on the Ukrainian issue. Russia's RIA news agency cited the Kremlin as saying. Okay, look, I want there to be good relations between the United States and all other countries on earth. We know that the Russian people, they're a proud people. They've got a long, proud history. There are many believers and indeed a large Messianic Jewish community in Russia as well as in Ukraine. And we hope that there can be good relations between the United States and Russia, which do not bring us to the brink of a catastrophe, a disaster. But how possible is that? It's hard to tell. That's why all we can do right now is pray for peace and pray for the Lord's will to manifest. But we are getting closer to the return of the Lord, and a lot of the hostility we've seen definitely falls into the rubric of wars and rumors of wars. Okay, so I do want to apologize for whatever that sound issue was. Of course, we'll look into it for the next issue, but technology being what technology is, yeah, I'm glad that it wasn't like what we had a number of months ago where the episode just froze and we had to stop. But yeah, thank you for keeping me on my toes. Those of you all who contacted me via the private messages and text. I'm glad you all are watching these episodes live and are keeping me informed if there is a little mix-up. As always, on behalf of Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers, encouragement, and donations toward all of our ministry efforts, especially if we do need to make some tech upgrades in the next year. Please, if you have not already, visit my website, messianicapologetics.net. There you can access a wide array of free articles, frequently asked questions entries, different back issues of Outreach Israel News. You can take a look at some back episodes of Messianic Insider, different McKee moment shorts, etc. And please be sure to give this episode a thumbs up or a heart. It'll help its exposure on social media. We will see you again tomorrow with another episode of Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you. Shalom and take care.